and for providing your very interesting and unique submission. So I'd just like to invite you to start your presentation.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm Spencer Scouler. I'm leading private electorate treaty materials, and I oppose the bill. In the first report of the Paparati or Taraki inquiry, the Waitangi Tribunal thoroughly examined what Rangatira consented to. My purpose today is to present what the British Crown consented to. I first explain why the British Crown needed to ratify the treaty signed by Hobson. Then I demonstrate through 5 key documents what was ratified. These documents are discussed in my written submission and are numbered 1 to 5 on the flowchart on page 3. My key message is that the British Crown effectively consented to only the English text of the treaty. While the British Crown ratified both texts, they ratified the treaty with the reservation that its translation is the English text of the treaty. This has significant implications for the treaty principles and treaty relationship. For the past 50 years, most people have implicitly assumed that the treaty-making process ended with the signing of the treaty sheets by Hobson and Rangatira. The complication is that the treaty was not an agreement between Hobson and Rangatira. It was an agreement between the British Crown and Rangatira. Under the law of nations, Hobson could only bind the British Crown if he acted within the terms of his commissions and the extent of his power. The British government authorised Hobson to negotiate with Maori for sovereignty in New Zealand. Under the law of nations, sovereignty is indivisible, which means there can only be one sovereign. According to the Waitangi Tribunal, at Waitangi, Waimati and Manunu, Rangatira did not cede sovereignty over their people and territory to Britain. However, Hobson did not have the authority to enter into an agreement where Maori did not cede full sovereignty. Furthermore, Hobson delegated negotiations with Maori, even though he did not have the authority to do so. Even if these issues were not problems, there are other reasons why Hobson's agreement with Rangatira did not bind the British Crown. Hapu, who held the rights in land, were not included in Article 1 of the treaty, and there was no provision for the ratification of the treaty. And Hobson did not correctly execute 8 of the 9 treaty sheets. Since Hobson did not act properly, for the agreement to be a valid treaty, it had to be ratified by the British Crown. Regarding the ratification, in July 1840, the British Crown ratified the English text of the treaty. 9 months later, the British Crown ratified the treaty with the reservation that its translation is the English text of the treaty. In effect, the British Crown only consented to the English text of the treaty. I will now present 5 documents, one by one. The ratification documents are originals, and the linking documents are copies from the originals at National Archives, London. This first document here contains the ratification that bound the British Crown to the English text of the treaty. It's one of 4 known copies. The second document is the official record of the treaty from October 1840. After the collection of signatures, there were 9 treaty sheets. Since the British government expected 1 treaty, all but one of the treaty sheets were combined into this official record on a long roll of parchment. At the top centre of the record is the word treaty, under which the Maori and English texts are put side by side. The signatures, witnesses and certification on the parchment have been cut off and lost. The third document is part of the official record of the treaty. It is the certified copy of the Manukau Kawhia treaty sheet. This certified copy was forwarded separately by Hobson to the Colonial Office in May 1841. In August 1842, this document was ratified with the reservation that its translation is the English text of the treaty. This fourth document is the back translation of the treaty into English. It was certified by Henry Williams on about the 15th of February 1840. Although the procedure used by Williams for back translation is usually argued to be invalid, these arguments miss the point. Williams was the commissioned expert. While anyone else may have provided a different translation, we cannot alter the fact that this is the only certified translation received by the Colonial Office. It was the official translation of the treaty into English. Since the Colonial Office lacked expertise in te reo Māori, they relied on the certified translation for the British Crown's ratification of the treaty. This document, which is another original, and this page, it refers to the ratification, is the ratification of the treaty by the British Crown, printed by the House of Commons. Unlike the long parchment over here, where the text was side by side, in the printed version, they put the Māori text before the English text. And then they added the word translation between the 2 texts. This meant that the British Crown ratified the treaty with the reservation that the translation is the English text of the treaty. Everyone in this room, and many people around New Zealand, have a passion for the treaty. We're all muddling through what the treaty means for New Zealand. From my perspective, I reiterate, I do not support the bill. I'm not here as an advocate for either Pākehā or Māori. I'm here to advocate for the treaty documents. I recognise that transparency about the ratification of the treaty is likely to have political, social, legal, economic and constitutional implications for New Zealand. Nonetheless, the key issue on hand is the documents show that the British Crown ratified the treaty as being the same as the English text. Therefore, they effectively, the British Crown consented to the English text. I believe it's important to the committee to understand this consent of the British Crown when they consider treaty principles. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Sure, thank you, Spencer. fascinating submission and a fantastic collection. I'm sure there may be some interest in people maybe wanting to inspect those documents with your permission. I'll ask that to take place in the hall outside the conclusion of the submission. I've got a series of questions, first from Duncan Webb, then Takata, then Steve.
Kia ora, thank you for that very interesting submission. You've given a long analysis, and I've read your submission on the British Crown's approach to the treaty. I'm particularly interested in how that corresponds on the other side of the fence with the Māori's approach to it. You say the British Crown agreed to the English version only. There's a strong argument the Māori agreed to the Māori version only. And of course, the law around treaties of cession from Indigenous peoples at around that time is quite complex. Where does that lead us?
The Waitangi tribe does a fantastic job in terms of what the Maori Rangatahi consented to, and what I present here, what the British consented to. And my analysis suggests that there may not have been an agreement. You'd go through the different articles and look at them and compare what the two were saying. There's a clear difference between what each party expected out of it. It also explains what's happened over the last 180 years in terms of misunderstandings. Potentially, people agreeing to different arrangements.
Thank you, Spencer. We'll go to Takata, then Steve, then Joseph, if we have time.
Tēnā koe, Spencer, and thank you for your submission. It really alludes to the complexity of it all. And when you have a sort of surface level discussion about it that's devoid of a clear understanding of the complexity, then you end up in muddy water. So I'm just wondering, given there's two parties and one party might believe one thing and one other party might believe another, there still exists the international laws within which the treaties are declared. And so a part of that law is a thing called contra preferentum, where the language of the receiving partner to the treaty will be the language that the treaty is interpreted through should there be disagreement. So given that, what is there a point for all of this argument, or should we just stick to that?
Your question assumes that there was an agreement. If there was an agreement, then there is a tendency to favour the Indigenous people's text. There's a difference in interpretation. But given there may not have been an agreement because we're agreeing to two different texts, that may be where the gap is between what's happening here.
Or just quickly, is it a tendency or law?
Sorry, we're out of time. Sorry, Takata. Thank you, Spencer. We appreciate you being with us. We will now move.
That is definitely a very interesting submission. Now, I mean, I'm not going to draw a view on it. I see the submission itself as an education of what's actually happened. And it's quite interesting that he brought up from the UK archives on what's happened rather than the New Zealand archives. And it's quite intriguing just the way, what he's brought up, which is interesting, finding out ratification dates of when things got ratified by the British Parliament and all that sort of stuff. Considering, I mean, from the original treaty signing to finally by the time they did the whole of New Zealand, it took them about 5 months. In the same time, they could have just gone to the UK.
Yeah. And actually, when he started speaking about the Crown, it reminded me, King Charles, the face of the Crown currently has come out last year after the hikoi and said, do not touch these documents. I do not authorize you to do anything.
Yeah.
The Crown itself has said, no, don't.
Yeah, and it's a very strong statement. The fact that the Crown, normally the Crown stays out of political matters.
Exactly.
Well, in a public aspect.
Yes.
In a public aspect. I do know privately.
Said, don't touch, hands off.
Yeah.
Leave it alone.
Yeah. But yes, we know what David's like. No. Even when the King Charles says don't go there, he would still put his hand in the cookie jar.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok.